Hello, welcome. And we've got people still filtering in, but we'll just get started. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay? Or if you can't hear me, please post in the chat. So thank you for joining us this afternoon for an introduction to the New York State Trauma Informed Network. My name is Chelsea Miller. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the Communications Director at the New York State Coalition Against Sexual Assault. I'll be helping to facilitate today's webinar. As far as housekeeping goes, if you have any content questions, please submit those questions through the Q&A box, which you'll see at the bottom or at the side of your screen. We'll filter them and address content questions after Amy's presentation. If you have any tech questions, please post them in the chat or email me at cmiller@niscasa.org. My email address is in the chat box already. This webinar is being recorded and we'll be able to share it later as well. At the end of the webinar, there will be an evaluation, so please fill that out and that'll be really helpful for us. Our moderators today are Chris Ballerano and Deb Faust. Chris and Deb might interject if any clarifications needed. Deb Faust is the Director of Family Engagement and Support Services of the Mental Health Association of New York State, or MAHANES, and co-director of Building Connections, a joint project with the New York State Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And her co-director on this project is Chris Ballerano, who is NISCASA's Senior Director of Collaboration and Training. Chris has been at NISCASA for 20 years now and has been leading the trauma-focused network called Building Connections since 1999. Our presenter today is Amy Scheel-Jones, Senior Consultant at Coordinated Care Services Incorporated. The core of her work includes sustainable system transformation grounded in trauma-responsive principles, positive youth development, and resilience enhancement. Amy oversees the Consortium on Trauma, Illness, and Grief in Schools, a regional comprehensive training and integrated crisis response network serving participating districts for over 18 years. Before we get started, Chris and Deb, if you would be willing to share a little bit about how the Trauma-Informed Network came to be and what your roles have been.
Sure. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Great. This is Chris speaking. I've been involved in the New York State Trauma Initiative since I came on board at NISCASA in '99, and there used to be statewide meetings that were held both in Albany as well as more regional conferences throughout the state that were really big and really focused on increasing the dialogues between providers of services and survivors of trauma. And there were, after a while, after 2001, there was a drop-off in that presence happening on a statewide level. So our project was tapped to do some of the trauma-informed trainings. And then over time, a lot of people who had been trained were recognizing that there needed to be a state-led initiative again. And I know that one of the movers and shakers behind this informed network is Kate Provencher over at OMH, New York State Office of Mental Health. And I leave it to Amy to talk about how that all came about, where her organization got brought on to really support the development of the network. But I will say that I had the privilege of getting invited to the first in-person meeting a few years ago, and then Deb followed in with when she became my partner, joined the network, and it's been a really wonderful evolution of folks partnering around the state to highlight where the work is excellent and where things can be collaborations that can be shared and shown as models for how this work can be done in various systems to enrich our communities.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna just make it short and sweet. I'm very fortunate to be a part of, the advisory team that's been coordinating and getting this wonderful site up and recognizing what the unique needs are. And I'm also very fortunate to work with Chris because she's a real champion of this work throughout the years. I've only been really a part of this work with Chris for about 6 or 7 years, and it's been a wonderful learning experience for me. And I'm grateful that this trauma-informed network is going to be highlighted today so that so many of our folks can access it and really enjoy it. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. This is Amy Scheel-Jones now speaking. Thank you for the privilege of this invitation and beginning to connect with all of you about this new resource that has been in development in one form or fashion since about 2016. To speak to the history a little bit, in 2016, there was a reconvening of the idea of a statewide conversation among champions of trauma-responsive practices or trauma-informed care. As part of that meeting, there was a lot of enthusiasm and energy and real excitement around the recognition that so much was occurring in terms of transformation efforts throughout New York State. And there really was a desire to continue to connect and partner through this work so we can avoid reinventing the wheel, but also really continue to support our emerging partners in taking on transformation efforts, whether it's within ourselves as individuals or the work that we do or the systems in which we interact. And while we can't always get together face to face for so many reasons, it was identified that a virtual platform may be helpful in terms of ongoing relationships, resource sharing, and certainly connections throughout New York State. And that's where this idea of the website that was born. So funding was made possible through the New York State Office of Mental Health, who committed to support this effort and engaged my organization, Coordinated Care Services, or CCSI, to facilitate both the advisory council as well as the development of this website that we'll be reviewing today. So the Advisory Council is made up of nearly 20 individuals. Currently we have 18 members, and we're continually seeking a diversity of thoughts and perspectives and ideas around needs and strengths in relation to this work. However, at this time, we have a really broad base of perspectives from across the lifespan, from roles in terms of serving perhaps direct providers, educators, as well as individuals who identify as having lived experience. We certainly seek to try to represent a variety of sectors, from state agencies to nonprofits, to community-based organizations, to schools, juvenile justice, etc., as well as diversity of regional perspectives. We're continually seeking cultural representation, both urban and rural, as well as racial, ethnic, or religious diversity of thought as well. Our goal of the network and this tool of the website is really to support champions of trauma-responsive practices across the state with that idea of improved connection to one another and access to quality resources. Resources that we as members can help curate to help distill out the good, high-quality resources from some of the noise that can be found out on the internet, as well as trying to centralize resources and events that are specific to New York State so that they're accessible to individuals trying to do this work. While I'd love to attend all the conferences that are available out, say, in San Diego, that's not always possible for me. But getting down the road from Rochester to Syracuse may be more likely, and certainly another lovely place to visit, for example. So today, as we walk through the main features of the site, as well as having the opportunity to demo some of aspects of the site, this is not intended to be an in-depth training. We'll talk a little bit about a couple of resources that may help you as you begin to use the site if you run into any challenges or problems or need support along the way. But this is really meant to increase your familiarity with what the site is, how it can function, and how to begin to take advantage of the features that we offer. So today we'll be reviewing membership options, how to look at and post resources and events, how to consider connection to others through a variety of communication tools, including discussion forums, as well as access to the blog post and monthly newsletter that is distributed. And I'll also briefly review 2 online organizational self-assessments that are accessible as links through the main landing page. Membership, first and foremost, is free. So there's no need to become a member to interact with the site. You are certainly welcome to look at the website, www.traumainformedny.org, to open and search resources and events, to look at organizations who've listed themselves as part of the organizational directory, or to engage with the blog posts that are there on a monthly basis. However, there are some advantages to becoming a member. By registering either as an individual or organization, you have the ability to post resources that you've developed yourself or publicly accessible, i.e. they're free and available for all to use out in the world, that you have found helpful in your work, as well as events that relate to trauma-informed or trauma-responsive topics. Events really can be considered with a broad definition. They may include training opportunities, they may include community forums, they may simply include things like film showings or other opportunities for different layers of community to come together and partner around this work. By registering, again, as an individual or as an organization, you also passively enroll in receipt of the monthly newsletter. The organizational directory becomes an option for those of us doing this work from a professional capacity and would like to do a deeper registration process that allows our organization to post our logo, describe the work that we do, list a contact for others to reach out to us to be a thought partner in doing this work, perhaps from our sector or in our region, or perhaps we're a provider of more formal services like training or consultation or capacity development, in which case this may also facilitate others finding resources that they would find helpful to the work that they're doing. An individual membership is simply about submitting an active email account. Your registration is not public in any way. No one would be able to find you, but you would be able to post your resources with a username and a viable email account. Organizational members have the opportunity, as I said, to opt in to completing the organizational membership. This includes posting in a searchable directory that I'll review as we go along. Once you are a member, as I mentioned, you're able to actually post either resources and events for others to discover. I will walk through this slide in a stepwise fashion, and then we'll exit out of the slideshow, go over to the live site where I'll demonstrate how this can look in real time. So the first thing that you would do is to log in to your individual or organizational membership. This is an email and password process. If you perhaps forget to log in as you go to the site to post your resource, as soon as you click add a resource, it will prompt you to do the login. So once you're there and logged in, you'll click on either the resources or events button on the top navigation or header bar, and then click an add a button. And again, it would be appropriate to whatever it is you are choosing to add. This will bring up a form. The form can look somewhat intimidating in the beginning. There's a lot of checkboxes, as well as the need to title the document or event and describe what it is that you're posting. The reason behind all of the checkboxes is one of the key aspects of and commitments that the advisory group made in developing this site was ease of use for anyone seeking to find that resource or event that was helpful to them. So by having checkboxes, we really build in a lot of searchable features for those of us on the other side of the resources seeking to identify ones that are helpful to us. Once we've completed the form, we can click the button Submit, and it gives us a prompt that we have completed that aspect. And then we also have the option to upload a file or a link to another online resource or website. So different types of formats are all accessible, from pictures to PowerPoints. If you have a slideshow that you've developed for a training that you're willing to share, those may be posted. Video clips may be offered, as well as PDF, Word documents, etc. We also encourage this idea of links to other helpful or commonly used websites. So for example, one that we might be familiar with is ACES Connection. We wouldn't expect that any one of us, myself included, would download all of the wealth of information that ACES Connection offers its own readership. What we might do, however, if we became aware of such a resource site like that one, is we may choose to post what that site is, how it's helpful to us or this work that we do, and include the link to that particular website. Again, just making sure that all of us, whether we're new to this work or experienced, have a good sense of what's out there and bringing it to our fingertips as much as possible. If we have made the decision to upload a file or add a link, then we simply make sure that we save at the end of that process. I'm now going to switch over to the live website, and hopefully this will work as planned, and show you our landing page. Now, this landing page can look different depending on the browser that you use or whether you're accessing it from your mobile device, but the basic functionality remains the same. In the top left, you'll see our logo. That logo is also a live button, so that as you begin to click through the website, if you ever wanted to return to this home page, you can always just click right on that New York State Trauma Informed Network logo. The pictures are meant to be inclusive and reflective of all different types of individuals or families that may live in New York. You'll notice that there's not an active slideshow scrolling through. However, images update and change so that as you leave the site and return to it on a different day, you may very well see a different image, even maybe a half hour later. So right on the first page, you'll see our welcome box that begins to orient individuals who are newer to the site about what it is we're hoping to do and our goal in having this site. We have our links to our 2 organizational self-assessments that are accessible through our site, and that I'll review later. You should also be aware that you can scroll down the site and get access to the buttons that are on the top navigation as well. I will not scroll through the site so much today because I am aware that in a webinar format that can lead to feelings of seasickness or dizziness for some. So I'll really be using mostly the top navigation bar and seeking to scroll slowly through pages where I choose to do that. Also on the landing page, if there are any upcoming events that are sort of hallmark events for people of New York, at times you will find that they're found at the bottom of this landing page as well. Up to the top navigation, the first 3 buttons that I'm going to review are the items that I just went over in my previous slide. So the resources and events are very similar to one another in terms of the process that is involved with them. So if I click on resources, you'll see that it takes me to a list. And this is where all of that work we do when we post a resource really makes a difference, because you'll see over here on what is our left-hand side as we look to the screen that we can search by topic. Any of these boxes may be checked if we're looking for a specific theme. We can also look by format. So perhaps we're here and we really want to find a helpful audio or video segment to use in a training that we're conducting. Or perhaps we want a foundational handout or one-pager that we could print out for some of our stakeholders. You can also search by keyword, or if you know the title of a resource that you're looking for, you can do so in this search bar, which functions very similar to a Google search bar, for example. To demonstrate how we would add a resource, you'll see this large button right over here. I'm going to click on that. And as you can see, I had not signed in originally when I came to this site, so it prompts me to do so at this time. If I'm not yet a member to have a sign in, I will have the option of signing in that moment. So there's lots of sort of checks and double checks to help people see what the options are along the way. So once I sign in, I'll be rerouted to my organizational dashboard. And mine looks busier than most other people simply because of the fact that we are administrators of the site. Right? So now if I were to add a resource, I'll click on my green button. And you'll see that I have the option of putting in a title, a one-sentence, perhaps, describer of what the resource is, as well as the ability to insert or cut and paste text about the resource itself. Down below is where you find the checkboxes, and you can check many different items. Perhaps it's a global resource that's really good for just about anything, or perhaps it's a toolkit that uses video segments as part of the toolkit. So you're not limited by checking a single box either in format or topic. Scrolling down at the bottom, that's where you see that submit resource, which would bring up the opportunity to link in then or add the attachment. Going over to events, it would function very much the same way. If I was looking for an event in addition to a topic, I might also be able to search by region if I wanted something geographically close to me, or I might search by audience. Is this something that's good for everyone? Is it really something that is geared toward professionals or providers who work in the field? Or is it something that's geared for individuals with lived experience and are identifying primarily as having that perspective and wanting resources from that perspective? To add an event, it would look very similar to how I just walked through the resource page. Again, you have the option to include an event name, someone to whom individuals who have questions about the event could contact, start and end date, as well as information about region, address if it's an in-person event versus a webinar. Generally speaking, we ask if can everybody access the venue? Meaning, can individuals with mobility concerns, etc., have access to the venue? So you indicate yes or no. The default button in terms of cost is free. If it is a registration fee, you simply unclick the box and indicate the registration process. And if there are parking details, you can also provide that through the Dropbox. There's the opportunity to write a brief description and a longer description, as well as the checkboxes that relate to those searchable fields. So audience, topic, etc. When you submit, you can both include perhaps a flyer that describes the event. So if you have a PDF or a picture file that you want to include, you can also include a link to an online registration, for example, if you have that as part of your event. All right. I am going to exit back over to the slideshow and walk through a couple other features of the site, and we'll come back and look at those in live format as well. We wanted to build in the idea of communication pathways. Trauma-informed NY.org is not a social media site per se. It doesn't have the same functionality as, say, an ACEs connection in that sense of being able to have really in the moment ongoing lively dialogue. But we do have different opportunities for there to be communication back and forth or one directional as well. So certainly there is a contact us button, and I'll show you that when we return to the live site. That is a form that you can fill out that raises a question. So perhaps you're having trouble, you feel like maybe the site isn't working correctly, you could let us know that as well. Or if you were beginning to use the site and ran into a little bit of a hiccup or a challenge area, if you send that email out to us, one of the site administrators would be back in touch with you to help you learn what you need to, as well as address any challenges with the site. The site really is meant to grow over time. So certainly myself and my team and the advisory council worked really, really hard in the development of the site to identify high quality resources that would relate to many different aspects of this work. However, we want our users to continue to help us grow and populate the site. What that means is not every resource is reviewed by an internal team. In the unlikely event that there is an issue with a resource or event, perhaps it appears to be objectionable or unrelated to the topic or the goals of the site, you may red flag that content for us, and that is hidden. And any flags that were to emerge would be reviewed within 24 hours to determine if that site was indeed questionable or inappropriate related to our efforts of improving trauma responsive practices across New York State. So we do have that sort of double check, but we also are aware from our collaborators, around the country, like Trauma Informed Oregon or ACEs Connection, that those types of incidences seem to be very rare or non-existent in the trauma responsive world. We do have the opportunity for a discussion forum format. So are there questions that you want to pose to users of the site and hopefully gain a helpful response? And I'll review those, as well as talk over the monthly blog. Those are posted on the first of the month and generally introduce a theme for the month that is then followed up with a deeper article in the monthly newsletter, as well as resources that support that month's topic area. So I will not show you a newsletter today because those go out via emails that are provided through the membership application, but I will show you the blog feature. I'm going to hop back over to the live site now. So up here again on the top navigation or header bar, you see these more grayed out buttons, but they are logged or live buttons. So the first way of communication is this idea of a directory. This is where organizations have volunteered to do that deeper membership registration so that they can indicate their logo, the title of their organization, a website if they have it, what regions are they active in, what sort of sector or population of focus do they have, as well as a description of the type of work that they conduct. Organizational members also volunteer to have a contact button so that we can begin to directly link with one another. Again, maybe perhaps to informally exchange ideas, as well as pursue more formal partnerships through a collaboration or a coalition, or even engaging in services with one another. The forums have not been particularly active to date, and that's okay. They're meant to be here if they're of use to users of the site as the site develops. But you can see we have some general themes to focus discussions. So are people looking for information on best practices? Are people looking for help responding to challenges in implementation of trauma responsive practice? Looking at self-care or staff resilience? There is a forum that's designed to be there for leaders of organizations or team leads to talk about how do I be a supportive administrator, for example? Where can I find training or consultation services, as well as a general catch-all discussion thread where any question related to trauma responsive practice implementation or support may be able to be posted. The blog, as I said, is launched new on the 1st of each month. They are all there from the beginning of the site. So there's certainly the opportunity to go back and read blog posts that came before. And this is one that I want to highlight. I apologize for the scrolling. The very first blog that was done, the December 2018, even prior to the site's launch, provides information in written text, much like I'm providing here, the main features of the site and how you can go about using them. So if the webinar is not enough and you need that second double check as you're using the site, that information is there for you. Each blog has a brief description of what the blog will cover, and then the link to opening up the full posting. These are meant to be short, sweet thought pieces that might help you deepen your thinking or come up with a new idea. And as I said, they roll into the theme of the month offered out through the newsletter. There is an About button that talks about both the origins of the site as well as our organization of CCSI. And here is that contact button that I referred to, where you really can submit any questions or concerns that you have so that we as site administrators can help you get the most out of what you are doing. All right, you can see we have a new image on the landing page as we came back to it. I'll shift back over to my slideshow and we'll talk about the last couple of features. The next thing that I wanted to highlight and talk about is really the links to the 2 organizational self-assessments. These self-assessments were not developed originally as a direct part of this current project and this website. However, our collaborators and our funders at the New York State Office of Mental Health certainly were key contributors to the origin of these ideas, as well as the Advisory Council feeling strongly that it's really helpful to have centralized resources, especially when they're free, in terms of navigating this work of system transformation that many of us are engaged in. So there are two available right on that front main landing page. The TRUST, which stands for the Trauma Responsive Understanding Self-Assessment Tool, and the TRUST-S, Trauma Responsive Understanding Self-Assessment Tool for Schools. So the trust came out of grant funding, New York State Success, Coordinated Care Services, and other collaborators throughout the state really invested and developed in an online platform for organizations to be able to distribute a link to all of their employees, where people can respond to a fairly brief survey and get benchmark indications of how that organization is doing in relation to the principles of trauma-informed care presented to us by SAMHSA. Any organization that participates in this online self-assessment receives, as I mentioned, benchmarking against each of these principles. So are you doing really, really well in this area? Are you starting to make progress, but perhaps not 100% consistent? Or perhaps are you really maybe struggling in one area or haven't begun to address it? Regardless of where you are at in that benchmarking, the tool also provides an individualized report for each of the principles that offers users the opportunity for some ideas of where to take the work next. It can be very helpful in understanding whether your efforts are making a difference, whether you're seeing change, as well as coming up with some new ideas or to guide a strategic plan or simply a capacity building planning process to help your organization, continue to move forward. As I mentioned, because of the nature of the original projects, these are all made available to organizations who are located within New York State for free. They're also designed to be able to be re-implemented. So perhaps you'd make a decision to survey your staff for a bench line or a benchmark about status of where you are. And then perhaps you might want to choose to survey again a year from now or on an annual basis to gauge your process and progress and guard against any sort of backsliding that can happen naturally as different initiatives or stresses come into play within organizations. The Trauma Responsive Understanding Self-Assessment Tool for Schools is one that I was privileged to contribute around. My background is working within K-12 education. So we and my colleague Deb Salamone, among other colleagues within CCSI, took a look at the Trauma Responsive Understanding Self-Assessment Tool and kept the alignment with the SAMHSA's principles of trauma responsive care or trauma-informed care, but really converted the question bank to be more accessible to school culture. So we sought wherever possible to make sure that any K-12 education employee could engage with that survey and have a pretty clear understanding of what it was meaning, what the questions were getting at in relation to the work that they were doing within that school setting. So both of those registration processes and the ability to learn more are linked right on that front main page of the website. We're certainly hoping that by giving of your time today and joining this webinar and learning about the site will encourage you to make use of the site for yourself, perhaps even consider joining as an individual or organization, as well as posting those resources or events that are meaningful to you or our events even that you're offering or resources that you're creating. We also really encourage you and hope that you will partner with us in getting the word out about what this website is and how it may be useful to those of us around the state seeking to do good work for ourselves, the kids and families that we serve, as well as the adults of all ages with whom we're serving and engaging with. If at any point you'd like more information, as well as perhaps a one-page PDF flyer about the website, or even a half-page PDF that could be printed on sort of takeaway cards, I'm certainly happy to distribute those out to anyone who'd like via email. So you can find my email there on the screen in front of you, as well as through my fellow collaborators such as Deb and Chris, who are so generous of their time and expertise in helping develop and launch this site, as well as individuals that you may know within my organization of Coordinated Care Services or the Office of Mental Health. But my email, ascheel-jones@ccsi.org, is free and accessible, free to use. And I thank you for your time and interest in this resource. And I open the floor now if there's any questions or concerns along the way that we should address.
Thank you so much, Amy. And a reminder to those of you who are listening in, you can submit questions through the question and answer function, or the Q&A.
There's nobody else. Thank you so much, Amy. This is Chris. Deb and I just really appreciate the clarity with which you went through all of those options available to folks through the website, and just delighted with the elegance of the website in general. It's so user-friendly, and we're getting more familiar with it each time we look at it. And I just wanted to ask one question. Once somebody becomes a member, can that person invite others to join, and how do they do so? What's preferred? What's the preferred way to share this information?
Sure. We really are relying on our relational networks, right? So if you are an individual who simply has a colleague or family member that you think might be interested, feel free to mention the website. Show it. It's a pretty easy domain name, that idea of Trauma-Informed NY. You can also find us via a Google search. You don't have to be a member, either as an individual or an organization, to use the site or talk about the site. We're really hoping that everyone might find it useful and share the information out. So whether that's grabbing a live link and sending it out via email through a listserv, you're certainly welcome to do that. If you happen to be in a role where you're standing in front of other people and sharing ideas about helpful resources, we encourage you to communicate it at trainings or events as something new and available in New York State. As I mentioned, I really am open and welcoming if you'd like the PDF flyer that describes a little bit about the event and you think that that would be helpful to either, if you have a printer and can run a few copies to hand out, or distribute again through your listservs or email lists, that's always a possibility as well.
Thank you.
Hi, Amy. This is Chelsea. I was wondering, I know you've talked about how the developers and the folks who are working on this plan and hope for this to grow. Are there any other features that may come up later on down the line that you're excited about? Or anything like in particular on the website you'd like to develop further?
Oh, thank you for that question, Chelsea. At this time, because we have launched so recently in April of this year. Most of what we're doing at this moment is monitoring the features that we've implemented in good faith and based on feedback garnered from the statewide community leading to the development of the site. That does not preclude the opportunity in the future for further development, particularly as we began to hear from users that there are certain things that they're finding as key gaps in order to be able to really move this work forward across the state. So there's nothing immediately planned. However, we expect and want to make this a usable site and a useful site that continues to be responsive to its usership over the course of years to come.
Awesome, thank you. Excuse me. There's a question that came up from Pamela. I'm not entirely sure that it's a question, but so Pamela's a board member of the New York State American Dance Therapy Association and also belongs to the New York Mental Health Counseling Association. And both of those organizations host a lot of trauma-informed events coming up. And I would say yes, it would be great to invite both organizations to become members.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the one thing that I didn't mention, I referred to this idea that there might be events that are highlighted out on that main landing page. If there's an event that you're posting, for example, that you know is open to the public, you really want to have a lot of people be aware of it and perhaps attend, whether it's in person or a webinar, you can always send me an email straight to that email that's still on the screen now and ask me to review your event. Because that's sort of a separate step that I take to pull out those key events. So certainly myself and my colleagues and the advisory council partners with me in sort of looking through the events that are available on the site to do that. But I'm always happy to have one kind of flagged, you know, sort of as a, for your consideration, would you be willing to post this on the main page? Because absolutely, I would give that due diligence. We can only have, I think, 4 at a time. So at times, sort of, you know, difficult priorities have to be made, but we can time things in kind of creative ways, as well as, of course, all the events that are listed are posted in that searchable directory of events.
Good to know. Good to know, yeah.
Amy, this is Deborah. I wanted to know, I noticed that you post that we can submit literature, articles. Can we submit and post books and authors?
Yeah, so oftentimes those things are done either with an image of the book, so perhaps there's a screenshot, or it's simply just a description, a title and a description, okay. Or perhaps a link to where the book may be purchased online. You know, so certainly, again, just that idea of this was meaningful to me and the work that I was doing. I want to make other users aware that it's a high quality resource that has good information on this aspect of this work. Yes. As a site administrator, there are times where I'm posting things that are publicly accessible, but I didn't write. Right? So usually in the description, I'll include who the individual or organization was that created, you know, brought to you by, and then the organization. So it doesn't look that posted by Amy Scheel-Jones or site administrator, it looks as though I'm taking ownership of someone else's work.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. We've had another question roll in. On the website, we'd seen different subject areas, right, that we can search, you know, resources or events. Are there some subspecialties or subject areas that you anticipate would be more difficult to find resources on, or more difficult to find great members to provide resources on?
There definitely, it is true that as we began to populate the sites from the beginning, that based on what we had accessible to us, either by our own research, our own resources, or through our partners, you know, there's just some resources out there that are more prevalent. So things related to young people or education often was a topic area where there was a wealth of resources to be found. If we were to perhaps look at aging adults, for example, I've clicked back on the site. We'll make sure that it works now, right? So now you're starting to see a smaller description, so that it went from more pages to 8 results only, so it all fit onto one. So these would be resources that either directly relate to aging adults or are general in terms of population, right?
Yep.
So there's not as many that would be specific to that particular population. So you may find, particularly in this early stage, that if you were clicking a particular format, you know, I'll try here on the presentations, right? There are a few presentations that have been posted, but not large numbers. And again, always the opportunity to grow, add, particularly individuals who have that perspective and expertise helping us would be really, really helpful.
Great, thank you for that. So yes, invite all of your friends, your colleagues to submit the work that they've been doing so that it's accessible.
And we also don't mean to imply through our checkboxes that those are the only topics or the only formats or the only audiences. But we wanted to try to do as much brainstorming as possible for those searchable features. But again, if you don't see a topic that relates to what you want to search for, give the search bar a try.
Great, thank you.
Is there still room for folks to make the administration team there in terms of adding new topics or adding new audiences, etc.?
So you cut out just a little bit, but I think there was a question about could we still expand the checkboxes?
Yes, that was basically the question.
Okay, great. The answer is yes, but it's a qualified yes. So we would absolutely take that feedback, and then as we work through our advisory council and our site developer, as well as, you know, the ongoing funding to encapsulate development or enhancements, all of those things would be rolled into a sort of an ongoing to-do list for us to continue to develop the site with authenticity.
Thank you.
So the short answer is we would take that feedback, but you might not see an immediate change.
Yep, I understand.
I get a little wordy sometimes.
I can relate.
Cool, thank you, Amy. This is Chelsea. What are some of the biggest takeaways that you think folks who are joining the webinar and folks who are encountering the trauma-informed network could take away?
What I would really want them to take away is that this is one tool, right? It's not the end-all be-all of every aspect of the work that they're doing. I would want them to feel that they're part of a community, that we really are seeking throughout this very large, diverse state with so many perspectives and so many influences, to try to create a rallying point around the value that we all have of sustaining health and resilience for all New Yorkers. And that if we're looking at this from a trauma-informed or trauma-responsive lens, this one tool may help further your own efforts, as well as provide you a platform to add your voice in the contribution of helping others further their efforts. So I would hope that they feel welcomed, that they feel encouraged to participate, and a willingness to help us talk about, share, and continue to grow this resource.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. Now, if there are any additional questions, please feel free to ask them. Well, that's about it. Do you have anything else that you would like to add, Amy, or Chris, or Deb?
For my own voice, I will say thank you again for the invitation, the time, the precious gift of time in giving me an hour to talk about this resource, and honest and heartfelt gratitude for the work that I know every participant is doing on a daily basis to take on trauma-responsive practice change.
Thank you, Amy. This is Deb. I just want to say, this was really helpful, because what I'd like to mention is that when I went up and started to navigate this site, there's excitement about sharing something that you care so deeply about, or that you've worked on, for hours trying to formulate, and then to put it out there on the airwaves. There's an excitement to that. And that's always, helpful in the work that we do, because the subject matter sometimes can be, we witness a lot of pain, and it's nice to have those moments where we can send out something that we really care about and get it across the state and post it on this wonderful site. So I thank you for that, and for giving us this wonderful presentation today.
Yeah, and I'll just say ditto. Ditto, ditto, and really looking forward. It's kind of gotten me excited to try to carve out some time over the next couple months, when things are allegedly going to slow down a little bit, I think maybe in the winter, to upload some other resources, and especially seeing that there were a lot less resources for elders. And at the moment, I'm helping to care for my elders, and aware of the gaps in what's available for folks to find really accessible. I'm going to look through our library and see if there are some things we can share from there, as well as other places that I'm learning about in my own personal world. So thanks again, Amy. This was delightful, and looking forward to meeting you in person.
Thank you, and likewise. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Deb and Chris. And thank
you
you to everybody who joined us this afternoon, and for those of you who submitted questions.
Thanks, Chelsea, for all your support of the webinar and moderating the way you have, facilitating.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. And so for everybody who's here listening, when you close out of the webinar, you should have a survey pop up afterwards with an evaluation. So please do fill that out. So that'll help us as we go forward. And we'll also follow up with an email. Okay. Thank you all, and take care.
Ciao.